Welcome back, everybody, to the Success Partner Podcast. I am your host, Daya Naef, and today we have on the show Lowell Mora. He is a fractional CFO, and I'm very excited to learn more about his business and how he helps people. So, Lowell, just introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Daya. My name is Lowell Mora. I run a firm called Impact CFO. It's a fractional CFO firm. I focus primarily on privately held businesses, family-owned businesses in the manufacturing, construction, industrial spaces, also business services, professional services, and really focusing businesses, small to mid-sized businesses that need help with their transition and or exit planning. That's a big gap in society, in our society, our business world today. And I've taken my experiences over the last 30 plus years and trying to apply it to that arena at this point. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lowell. And we were talking just a minute ago about some things happen when that transition goes badly or after the transition. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, it's more the case today that there's no plan for transition and or an exit, and something tragic happens, that somebody passes away, business owner passes away, or somebody has a debilitating, condition or something like that. The staggering statistic that I use all the time is that nearly 50% of family-owned businesses end up in bankruptcy within 2 years of the death of the founder or the current owner. To me, that's kind of an epidemic or an endemic in our society. And really, it's not just the family that has the issues there, then all of the other stakeholders, primarily the employees who have typically been with these companies for very long tenures. When somebody goes bankrupt and they just shut the doors, there's a lot of people on the street. So in my own little way, I'm trying to help that kind of issue in society and in our business world.
Yeah, I mean, what's a good way to avoid that?
It's simply planning, right? So the reality of it is that typically the aging business owner, I get in trouble when I talk about this. I'm one of the oldest Gen Xers out there. But the baby boomers that are getting to the retirement phase don't want to look at the end, and they're not really planning. I've never met a business owner who thinks his business isn't worth more than what it really is. They've typically run a hub and spoke operation and don't have strong management teams built out. So when something does happen, they're not in a position. So the way my practice runs is I like to have 3 to 5 to 7 years to plan out what are we going to do to get your business in condition over a wide range of characteristics and demographics to allow you to have that successful exit. A lot of business owners haven't talked to their children, right? Are the children not interested? Do you have a key employee who might want to purchase the business? Many, many factors. So it's all about taking the right amount of time to put the business in condition to maximize the external value, the terminal external value of the business. So, but there are a lot of challenges in getting people to think about it and talk about it. So,
yeah, nobody wants to think about mortality
no,
or whatever.
absolutely not.
And it's funny because people will just as likely decide that on the birth of the grandkids or something like that. They're like, oh wait, being 100% in my business all the time is not really what I want. They think they have this whole extra 30 years or something like that, but then all of a sudden their life conditions change in a good way, and they need to plan, like you said, 5 to 7 years. But today's the day that I don't want to come to work anymore. How do we start waking people up on this?
I think it's just continuing to talk about it. What I find is that as I mentioned before, I'm having a lot more success in my business. I'm very upfront and direct with people in their 50s who have a little bit of a different perspective. who say, hey, my kids, I either need to be ready for my kids to come into this, or I need to come up with a plan, because I don't want to be sitting at my desk when I'm 75 and not have a plan. Um, because they're starting to think about what they do outside of work. So part of the big challenge is that a lot of business owners don't want to talk about it. So I'm trying to use networking partners and other spheres of influence, whether it's a business coach, an insurance agent, a financial advisor, to kind of rattle the cage to say, hey, you need to think about this. Um, so when people start hearing things from several different directions, they may start to think about it. But I'm not going to pretend that it's not a tough sell. It's a really tough sell for people to think about their mortality. And part of it is that business owners don't know what they're going to do if they're not running that business. What is their identity? Is so much of their identity built up into their business? So, some of the things I try to do is when you're building a transition plan, well, let's see who we're going to sell this to. Can you step back, have somebody you can trust, and be working 20 or 30 hours a week, still have your hands in it, have some ownership, and continue your legacy, because so much of this is legacy, and it's the family name and all those things. Now that presents a whole different multitude of issues, but it's a start to try and make that a better transition.
Yeah. Can you share a story that's like that? Something that's maybe a family business that you helped work this out for?
Yeah, I mean, it's one that's still ongoing, and we had a business that now I'm working with the mid 50s son who's running the business,
Hmm.
and his father, who's in his 80s, wouldn't give up the business, wouldn't make the transitions, wouldn't do it. Um, and he was having, unfortunately, some mental incapacity. And we really, over a 2-year period, worked with some attorneys and um, almost arbitration type therapists to get things to move along. But that takes a long, long time. And that business still, we've had a transition about 3 years ago, but we're still fighting or dealing with some of the lingering issues from a business that didn't get the attention or the care that it needed. So those things take a long time to get out of. But again, I like to talk to, getting somebody to hire a fractional CFO or a fractional marketing person or a fractional HR person is really difficult. When you start talking to business owners about, hey, you should have a business coach
Hmm.
or somebody who will help you on the emotional therapy side, they really shut down, right? So it's really tricky. There's no perfect answers, right? What I'm seeing now, as I mentioned earlier, is business owners in their 50s are really starting to say, hey, I don't have anybody coming in this. I work with a client that they've been in business since 1885,
Wow.
fourth generation. They don't have any family members coming in, and they've said, hey, we need to make a plan,
Hmm.
and we're putting the business in a good position from an operating standpoint and a financial standpoint to do it. And then we're going to start examining, how do you market this business, right? How do you put it into somebody else's hands? Now, the plan with that one is a key employee may want to buy it. There comes a lot of issues then with a key employee buying it, because the key employee then doesn't necessarily have the financial wherewithal to buy the business.
Hmm.
People, even though the SBA is very, very open to lend money, um, people buying businesses then all of a sudden clam up and say, well, I don't want to give any personal guarantees. Well, it's very tough to borrow money without personal guarantees. And then we're getting into this big phase of a lot of seller financing, which I'm sure you're seeing as well,
Hmm.
which isn't a horrible thing, but it leaves some risk for
It's
the
risky.
sellers.
Hmm.
Um, So there's a lot of stuff to deal with there and to really look at. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting situation, and like we were chatting before the call, also about XBX, and I had originally joined XBX because there are lawyers there as providers, but I'm also finding that in the reverse, law firms are going through the same transition, and it's sort of an awkward thing. And I often get approached by the Gen Xer or that says, "Hey, I don't know what the plan is." And I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable with this. Do I need to be looking for another firm? Do I need to be setting up my own thing? Because it's always going to be the Joe Smith law firm, and I'm not Joe Smith. How am I going to how am I going to have a succession plan in this firm when Joe Smith doesn't want to talk about it?
right, right. But people don't want to think about, and law is a particular field where um, partners and senior members have stayed around for very, very long times, way way past their expiration date. And I guess we all have to look at it and know and realize what our expiration date is. But it's their identity as well, and they're hard to do it. So that's a huge issue. The law firms are a little bit different because law firms have lots of qualified people who could run a firm and continue that process. In manufacturing and industrial things, the two biggest things we're facing are, one is the lack of a strong management team below that person, below the owner. Um, and two, there's a significant amount of we call customer concentration, right? So you have somewhere like 50, 60, 70% of your business is with one customer, which is very, very risky. Um, and once you get into a situation like that, which is typically thought of as a good situation, it's very tough to unwind or to get enough business to change that significantly. And when you go to sell a business, you're going to take a real significant haircut on your valuation because of that. And that's one of the other things that I talk about is my model is I want to work with somebody for 3, 5, 7 years to get a plan in place. Now, there's lots of people out there who help to sell businesses, business brokers, exit planners. They're brought in to make something happen more quickly. Um, and that's not the way that I want to approach it. I mean, sometimes you lose value in a fire sale. So, you know, my the way I look at my entire career is I started as an auditor with Arthur Andersen way back when, and I worked for a couple big publicly traded companies at the start of my career for about 5 years, and then I made the switch into family-owned businesses. The um, publicly traded companies operate based on the Wall Street and quarter to quarter, which sometimes will sub-optimize the long-term vision of a business, I think. The same at the back end, the businesses I helped to sell were sold into private equity. Private equity's model is to flip something in 3 to 5 years, and there's sometimes some sub-optimization. I like that family-owned business that can operate with a mid to long-term perspective, and focus and not sub-optimize things. The challenge with family-owned business and privately held is a sense of urgency. So you still have to work with a sense of urgency because things still need to be done. So yeah, there's a lot of conundrums and issues out there, but it's certainly keeping people busy. So
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm glad we have people like you to help us and untangle it and sort it out and optimize. Like you never sell a fixer upper or an as is for what you could get it if you planned out ahead and tested the market and did the stuff that the experts do.
yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. So Lowell, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so it's really easy. I have a website with lots of content and information. It's impactcfo.net, not .com, impactcfo.net. Email me directly at lowell@impactcfo.net. And I have this old fashioned thing called a phone. You can call me directly and I'll pick it up anytime. My number is 847 888-212-4081. And I'd love to hear from anybody who would like to talk about any of these topics we've talked about, any networking partners, and primarily business owners that are looking to make the plans and transitions.
Yeah, make those plans, plan ahead. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lowell, for being here. Thank you for listening, everyone. This has been another episode of the Success Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Daya Naef. Please like, subscribe, and stay tuned.